one of the things that we've been thinking about is who's out there and flying for multiple reasons. And I think those of you who are running small businesses, one of the things that I hope you've heard a lot is you can't go do one thing. You can't just do real estate. You can't just do survey. You can't just do journalism. You've got to be able to build a business model that reaches across multiple programs there. These next two gentlemen founded something called Atlanta Drone Group a couple of years ago, and they really are sort of the model of looking at how do you use drones on a consulting basis for multiple different industries. They started with fire protection services and then have expanded out to some industry stuff for oil and gas, as well as media stuff. And they're going to be talking about the work that they were doing for a couple of different entities during the hurricane situation down in Houston earlier this year. So with that, I'm going to welcome Walt, Wylupek, and Matt Sloane. Come on out. All right, here we go.
Check. Got it. Cool. All right, well, it's a true pleasure here to be with you all today. Again, my name is Walt Wylupek, and I am Chief Strategy Officer for Atlanta Drone Group. Just a super quick background on us, just so you have a feel for who's taking up your beautiful Saturday afternoon here. Atlanta Drone Group is actually made up of 3 divisions: Atlanta Drone, SkyFire Consulting, and Avius. Atlanta Drone handles film and television. We serve Georgia's booming film and TV industry. We also provide aerial support for various national news agencies such as CBS National News and the Weather Channel. And I'll be talking about that very, very briefly here. SkyFire Consulting is our public safety division. SkyFire gets more public safety organizations flying with their own in-house drone program than any other company in the country. We offer FAA consulting, training, SOP and program development, and of course equipment sales. We serve fire departments, search and rescue organizations, police departments, and a whole array of various government agencies. Everyone here has probably heard of DJI, right? They are the world's largest SUAS manufacturer, and they own about, I guess, 70% of the market share. Back in 2015, they actually made SkyFire their very first enterprise dealer to kind of help them gain traction into the commercial markets. So that's given us a very unique perspective into the world of commercial drones. And then we have our third division, Avius, which is our industrial division that serves energy, construction, and asset tracking industries. Avius also provides emergency response operations for railroads, about 6,000 miles of pipeline, and the infrastructure responsible for about 50% of the East Coast supply of petroleum. Our CEO, Matt, is here, and he'll be talking about the work Avius performed during Hurricane Harvey to kind of give you a better feel for what drones are doing for the oil and gas industry after natural disasters. Excuse me. So that in a nutshell, that's who we are. As you can see, our 3 different divisions seem to be very different at first glance, but whenever a disaster strikes, every single one of our divisions pulls together, worked overtime to achieve a common goal of keeping people and the property safe. All right, so now let's dive into the good stuff. This is why we do what we do here. Our main objective is to keep people safe by getting folks to take action before and after a storm. You've seen all the crazy weather reporters getting blown around in these wild storms, like Jim Cantori here, who we actually had in a SWAT team helmet and a tether tied around his waist in the eye wall of Irma. We'll show you a little bit of footage from that shortly here. But anyway, a lot of people are asking why. Why risk life and limb to do this? A lot of our guys are actually often accused of being reckless adrenaline junkies or professional rubberneckers. We've been called all sorts of things, but that just isn't the case. A lot of us actually came from public safety backgrounds. I know Matt, one of our co-founders, Adam, and I actually worked EMS together back in college. So, keeping the public safe is certainly something near and dear to us and has been for quite some time. The attention spans of people have kind of dwindled over time, and it takes a lot more effort to get them engaged. And right or wrong, many people out there felt kind of misled by the media. They think that media tends to blow things out of proportion, at least in their opinion. I think differently, but yeah, it's definitely difficult to get people's attention and hold it for an extended period of time. But anyway, this certainly wasn't the case with either of the storms that I'm about to talk about, namely Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. Both were absolute monsters. So, why we're here today? How the heck do we use drone tech to get people to actually take action, to board up their houses and evacuate, to send help and money to victims after the storm. And how do we do this without losing our own lives, or more importantly, our expensive equipment? Two of the biggest weather events in history just happened earlier this year, and both tested the limits of man and machine like never before. So now let's, just a quick recap of the storms. I know they're still kind of fresh in our memory here, but Hurricane Harvey was the most extreme rain event in U.S. history. About $70 billion in damages. Some estimates put it as high as $200 billion. Up to 64 inches of rain in places. Hundreds of thousands of homes inundated by floodwaters. 30,000 people displaced, which is insane. It's, a lot of these people still haven't returned to their homes to this day. 17,000 rescues. Our pilot Jake and I were actually in the heart of a lot of the rescues, and I'll talk about that shortly as well. Moving on to Irma, was a Category 5, the most intense hurricane since Katrina back in 2005. About $63 billion in damages, 185-mile-an-hour sustained winds. And just to give you an idea of how massive this storm was, all the way, everybody knows where Atlanta is, of course. All the way in Atlanta, Irma was actually responsible for the very first tropical storm warning in the history of Atlanta. And there were, unfortunately, 134 fatalities. But not to turn people into numbers here, but out of the millions of people affected by the storm, it's actually pretty incredible how relatively few lost their lives. How so? There are a few reasons I'm going to get into about this. First of all, the media did a fantastic job of covering the storm. Despite often conflicting forecast models, I think you guys remember the spaghetti models that were kind of all over the place there. Despite the conflicting models, meteorologists, reporters did an incredible job with the information that they did have. They erred towards the side of caution at the risk of being labeled, the boy who cried wolf, should, the worst case scenario never happen. Various federal, state, and local agencies did a fantastic job of coordinating evacuations and post-storm relief. Lots and lots of tough decisions were made exactly when they needed to be made. And of course, the efforts of our heroic first responders, from amateurs like the Cajun Navy that I'm sure you guys have seen, throughout the media, to FEMA teams and volunteer agencies from all around the country, fire departments, search and rescue teams, and all sorts of relief agencies. They came in with lots and lots of manpower and various equipments, like boats and things like that, and probably one of the most powerful displays of humanity our country has ever seen. So how did we help tell this story? I guess it all starts with a new technology that allows us to do just that. A lot of this stuff wasn't around, 3 or 4 years ago. We aren't just a drone company that goes around, filming random things to sell to the media. You've probably seen a lot of drone footage on various channels, and we actually functioned as members of the news teams that I'm about to talk about. A lot of the drone footage you'll see will have credits, that show who did the filming, not ours. Everything that we filmed was actually the property of the news agencies that we were working with. So most, if not all of the footage, all of the drone footage that you saw on CBS or the Weather Channel during these storms that didn't have credits was actually ours. So here's a quick rundown of the tech that enables us to do what we did, and this is very similar to what we use for all of our live news coverage. We have a weather-resistant drone. In this case, it's the DJI M200, DJI's latest and greatest. It has a fantastic camera on board, several different camera options, which I won't get into here, but we've actually had various professionals tell us that our video quality is better than that of large ground-based cameras. I really don't know about that, but it's very, very good nonetheless. The M200 has an IP43 rating and can take a lot of water. We literally had the drone in the worst rain America has ever seen, and it was a champ. We had in 40-knot winds, and it was absolutely rock steady. It also features ADS-B, which is it's kind of a glimpse into the future as to how to make drones safer, how to make them play well with manned aircraft. ADS-B will actually allow you to know when a passenger aircraft is coming in, along with the passenger aircraft speed, direction, and even their tail number. So it can be quite helpful. And I think most of you guys have seen a satellite truck, beams a live HD signal back to the news desk. For CBS, it was the news desk was in New York City. The Weather Channel was in Atlanta. It's either a massive big rig box truck with a huge dish on it, or a Suburban with a smaller dish on it. One of the drawbacks is it's not always available. The dish has to be brought down and the truck parked in a safe place when winds exceed a certain threshold. Then we have Bottom left there, the live view. That's a little box that can actually fit in a backpack, and it streams an HD signal over multiple 3G or 4G connections back to the newsroom. And functionality actually depends on how good the cell signal is. It's a bit pricey, about 25 grand plus subscription fees, and it's great when it works, but when Irma hit, Team Cantori down in Fort Myers, they experienced a total loss of cell phone signals. So we actually had to use one of our little generators and the hotel Wi-Fi to stream content back to the news desk in Atlanta. Cell phone, you guys all know what a cell phone looks like, but we use it for various functions like communicating with the news desk, the various producers. It could be hundreds or even thousands of miles away. We also have an app here called ForeFlight, which was actually created for manned aircraft pilots. In addition to their Part 107 certification that many of you guys are familiar with, most of our pilots are actually Part 61 manned aircraft pilots. So our guys actually fly anything from light sport planes to Cessna 172s, all the way up to military helicopters and even 747s in the case of our guy Bill. So knowledge of airspace is absolutely essential for each and every UAV mission flown, disaster or not. And ForeFlight is great. It helps navigate complicated airspace, notify pilots of NOTAMs, which is notices to airmen, notify pilots of FAA TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. And the FAA, as you can see here, actually issued the largest TFR since 9/11 after Harvey hit, just so the rescue helicopters wouldn't run into any rogue drones and that kind of thing. The FAA did actually grant a few agencies waivers to operate drones within the TFR, so contrary to popular belief, the FAA actually supports drone use, provided it's with the right agencies who can actually coordinate unmanned operations with manned operations. We have our aviation radio. It's very rarely a good idea for a drone pilot to get on an aviation radio, but we keep one on hand, to monitor air traffic just in case. If necessary in an emergency situation, our manned aircraft pilots are very well versed in the radio traffic and as such. But yeah, all this gear is what really helps us tell the story in ways possible not even 3 or 4 years ago, and this kind of gets us into the next slide. And this slide goes back to the whole convincing the public to take action thing. The more engaged an audience is with a reporter, the more effectively a reporter can show how dangerous a situation is, the more likely an audience is to take action and respond to a critical situation. And here are a few examples of the live shots that we've done. Each and every live shot is, of course, choreographed by the producers in the newsroom, can be hundreds or thousands of miles away. As the reporter is talking, we'll actually have a drone in the air around them, and the newsroom will cut to a drone shot of the reporter as he or she is talking about the site. These swooping, dynamic shots give the audience a true feel for the reporter's setting, just stuff we weren't able to do a few years ago. On the top left here, we have Nora O'Donnell from CBS News while we were in downtown Houston near the Buffalo Bayou has exceeded historic flood levels. We actually had to wrap early from that scene because Harvey took out 3 of the 4 press tents that we had set up on site, just blew them away. Below her is David Begnaud from CBS News, just as people were being rescued by boats in Houston. This is something that really kind of hit my crew kind of hard. Just seeing the relief of people's faces as they reached dry ground was something that'll really forever be etched in our memory. It was just a truly heart-wrenching moment for me and Jake. But next to Nora here, we have Mike Bettis from the Weather Channel while we were covering Hurricane Matthew in Charleston. Below, we got Mark Strassman from CBS News after a large tornado blew through South Georgia. And it's kind of an interesting shot here because we were actually told that these were the very first live shots ever broadcast by drone on national news at night, since we actually beat a few agencies like NBC and CNN who have their own in-house drone programs to acquiring an FAA night waiver to be able to fly at night. And Mark's a great guy. We do a lot with him in Georgia and throughout the Southeast. And of course, we have Jim Cantori in the photos on the far right with our CEO, Matt. Jim does things a bit differently. He uses the drones as part of the actual story, which I'll show you video of momentarily here. A lot of you guys may remember when the internet absolutely flipped out about his flipping out over thunder snow. He's a great guy, every bit as intense in person as he is on TV. So he's had actually multiple excited thunder snow moments off camera with our drones. He's absolutely hoot to work with, and I'll show you some great behind the scenes video of him shortly. I think you guys will really get a kick out of. Excuse me. In addition to connecting the audience with reporters, it is absolutely essential that we connect them to the people and the places in an engaging way. A drone allows audiences to experience storms in ways never before possible. Drone allows audiences, more complete views of large areas and going where humans can't go. Views that simply weren't possible just several years ago with or without helicopters. That's the thing about helicopters. They have to fly at a certain altitude. The prop wash will actually disturb a lot of the ground under it, and that's not good for many reasons. But here are a few shots that we took into Harvey that kind of give you a sense of how crazy things got. On the top left, we have a major interstate that flooded. Our pilot Jake and I were stuck a couple hours watching people drive through floodwaters. People were driving the wrong way at high speeds on the highway, just absolutely losing their minds. Cars were stalling out all around us as water was sucked into the air intakes. And you'll see in the top center photo just how high the water did get. The water was so deep that 18-wheelers were sucking water into their air intakes and stalling out. And this shot is actually a rescue of a stranded truck driver by Houston Fire that we were able to film from above, and CBS really just used the heck out of that footage for the next few days. The photo to the top right is actually a great example of how people found creative ways to help each other. A construction company actually donated a dump truck to rescue people in deep water. You know things are bad when you have to be rescued from the roof of your house by a dump truck. Bottom left is one of hundreds of thousands of vehicles flooded by the waters. The drone it allowed us to fly up to the vehicles and check for victims inside. There are actually, unfortunately, quite a few fatalities where people drowned inside their cars, but fortunately, all the vehicles that we happened to come across were clear. Bottom center photo is our pilot Jake flying our drone to get a bird's eye view of cars stuck in water on the highway. Again, checking to see if anybody needed, really, really quick help. The bottom photo, bottom right, really got me as I'm a huge animal guy. I think we all are at Atlanta Drone. A female deer and its baby nearly drowned after becoming exhausted while swimming a really long time trying to find a place to stand up. And random strangers just pulled them into a boat, took them to dry land, and they received veterinary care by several veterinarians who happened to be on site. So drones are able, obviously, to find human and non-human flood victims much faster than conventional methods, and that's something that Matt talked about earlier in the public safety presentation. But moving right along here. This slide goes into what should be the top priority of each and every drone mission or field report, namely safety. Keep your crew safe, your equipment safe, and yourself safe. The moment you get hurt is the moment that you become part of the problem and not the solution. The pic on the top left kind of gives you a sense of the scale and feel for just how dangerous Harvey was. It shut down the 4th largest city in America, and the blue dot you see is actually where Jake and I were stuck on high ground for hours until we could be directed by Houston Fire to a route that, didn't involve crossing deep water, that was deeper than our vehicle. So things were so bad, in fact, that the Texas National Guard had to give us Humvee escorts to get from live shot to live shot at times. I cannot express how selfless and amazing the men and women at the Texas National Guard are. They just did some very heroic things, many of which you've seen on television. But the photo at the top right gives you a good feel for what was around us and what was inside, around and inside of thousands of homes in Houston. The water was just nasty, nasty stuff. You'd see people on TV playing in it, which is just a horrible idea. It was so bad that the fire departments out there who would wait around the waters would immediately hose off afterwards, in between operations, just kind of get the funk off their waders and boots. The water was full of toxic chemicals, bacteria, fecal matter, and all sorts of nastiness that I just won't get into here. But this right here, this is what had me more freaked out more than anything. Does anybody know what this is? Yes, very good. It's a fire ant raft, one of thousands floating around Houston. Obviously, in a flood, a colony of fire ants will kind of huddle together and form a life raft to stay alive. And if you weren't paying attention, your leg bumped up against it, they'd immediately swarm you and start biting. I know this actually happened to several news crews out there, and I don't know if you guys have experienced a fire ant bite before, but it takes just a few bites to make for a very bad day. Anyway, moving right along, on the bottom left, you'll see us with a can of SpaghettiOs. It's very important to keep yourself and your crew fed in the field. Storm coverage is a 24/7 operation that takes a lot out of you. You're so busy the entire time that you just simply forget to eat. When your blood sugar is low, it's pretty dangerous. You can make really poor decisions. You really want to avoid that. While cold SpaghettiOs obviously aren't the healthiest choice, they're one of my faves for camping and disaster response because I'm weird like that, and they're really easy to carry around. And
it's better than warm tuna.
Oh, totally. But anyway, next picked over is our pilot, Jake. There, he's holding the remaining surviving press tent down in some really crazy winds, you know, that scene with Nora O'Donnell. Like I said, the winds from Harvey took 3 of the 4 press tents we had set up. So the production team had to huddle together under one tent all together with their laptops and their other sensitive non-waterproof electronics. So Jake was definitely the hero that morning. And it was kind of funny. Nora O'Donnell was so impressed that she posted Jake's act of heroism on Snapchat. Despite his feet leaving the ground several times, I'm not making that up, that actually happened, Jake did come out uninjured. So the bottom right shows what can happen, even if you're super careful. The wind picked up a piece of metal, smacked me right in the arm, tore through a very robust Gore-Tex jacket, and cut me up pretty badly. But it served as a great reminder to never get cocky and overconfident. So, and speaking of not getting cocky and overconfident, this is something that cannot be overstated. People in disaster situations are scared, and rightfully so. I mean, these people are losing their homes, their cars, their livelihood, sometimes more than that. So you really owe it to them, you know, when you're in their hometown, to be very respectful and compassionate, and just don't forget to take care of yourself too. You always, always, always have to prepare for erratic behavior wherever you go. And here's a situation that occurred despite many, many, many turn around, don't drown signs throughout Houston. Jake and I parked on a road with no traffic next to the famous Buffalo Bayou that runs through the center of Houston. It was closed due to obvious flooding, but the fire department let us in anyway because it was a really cool place to fly and get live shots of downtown. As we were setting up, we heard the racing of an engine in the distance. Both Jake and I are car guys, so we actually turned to each other and commented on the sweet sounds of whatever mystery vehicle was causing such glorious noise. Then it got louder and louder and louder, and soon it felt like we were at a NASCAR race. It was so loud. And all of a sudden, this brand new Challenger, still with dealer plates on it, flies around our parked SUV, narrowly missing Jake and our drone by a couple of feet. Seeing water ahead and a speed limit sign in the water that you can kind of barely see there. It's so deep that part of the numbers on the speed limit sign were partially covered. Driver panicked, floored the accelerator pedal even more, and went Dukes of Hazzard style right into the water. Jake and I then had a water rescue on our hands. Fortunately, we were able to bring the driver to safety, but the car obviously didn't fare so well. As you can imagine, there was a bit of a heated exchange since the guy nearly killed my pilot and my drone, but I quickly learned that the guy had just lost his home in the floods and he couldn't make contact with his family. His brain just was not functioning properly due to the stress, so we gave him a jacket, made small talk with him to kind of calm him down, and you know, eventually found out his family was okay, made contact with him, and you know, just kind of waited with him, give him a little bit of support until help could arrive. So takeaway from this story is be kind, be compassionate, but be careful. The moment you become injured, you are part of the problem and not the solution. And now for some video that I promised you earlier to kind of wake everybody back up. Well, actually a quick synopsis, then I'll shut up and let you enjoy it. But we'll start off with a fun behind-the-scenes video of how Team Cantori likes to do a hurricane. Matt's in it. And then some drone shots of Harvey and Irma to kind of tie all the points I just discussed together. What's amazing about the Cantori footage from the Eye of Irma that you're about to see, I actually told you about that earlier, so let's just get started with the video. Yeah.
What we got? I'm going to get you with a shot at cooking.
Oh, all right, okay. So this is the Matt Sloane edition of How to Stay Fed During a Hurricane. I'm here with Steve.
What's up, boys and girls? Good evening from Team Cantori.
And we've got Trey over here.
Hey, hey.
And we are in the Hampton Inn. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's Cantori.
We like to call him Chef Trey Meister.
Okay, let's
Trey RD.
Chef Trey Boyardee.
All right, we got a little soy sauce.
Barbecue chicken,
Oh, dude, you're not mad. Oh my God, look at the size of that chicken. Oh my.
wings and potatoes.
I mean, look at this.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you do a hurricane with the Cantori crew right here.
I mean,
This
seriously.
is how you do it.
I don't eat this well at home. Look, we've got the.
The only bummer is we can't have a beer with this.
Look at this. Yeah, we've got chicken wings, potatoes.
Son of a bitch.
Uh-huh.
God, I love this guy.
I know. This is. Thank you, Trey. Thank you. We were like looking at all this stuff, going, I don't know how we're gonna cook it all, but the Hampton Inn has a great.
Great.
Ben's got the rolls.
I've got rolls.
Ben's got rolls. And we've got the Otis Spunkmeyer oven going. We're gonna put some stuff in there. We got the chicken going. We got the steaks.
I believe the wings were marinated in some soy sauce type with chilies added?
Yes. Well, when we have like another 2 quarts of soy sauce,
So we'll probably need more.
so we're probably gonna need more.
Yeah. I'll go.
We should probably get
Maybe.
some more soy sauce.
Yeah, we're running low.
The use of drones after disasters is providing both help and headaches. Matt Sloane from the Atlanta Drone Group joins us now in the studio with more on that. I've worked with Matt a couple of times. And Matt, you know the only time we can get a good picture when we can't get to areas that have been damaged is with a drone.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, being able to fly over things and not having to worry about the dangers of putting a helicopter or even the wind speeds, you know, sometimes the helicopters can't get in. The drone is definitely the only way to get in there. So getting, you know, close-up views, doing damage assessment, surveys, search and rescue. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great tool.
So let's talk about the FAA, because there are issues with where they can fly. Are there privacy issues with drones? How does that all work out?
Yeah, so not so much privacy issues. The FAA has been very clear that they focus primarily on safety. But what they do say is that, you know, there are certain rules about where you can be in relation to airports. You can't fly over people who are not participating. Of course, after Harvey, they put up what they call a temporary flight restriction for the entire city of Houston. That shut everybody down effectively so they could get the helicopters in and out for rescue.
Yeah, but what about the people who are worried about privacy? I wasn't necessarily meaning the FAA's
Yeah,
rules.
no, absolutely.
Like, oh, I don't want someone looking at my house, you know?
Yeah, it is a concern. And Jim can tell you, since we've been out doing this a couple times, that once you get a few feet off the ground, you know, you're not actually seeing very much. You'd actually be more effective with a still camera, you know, the long lens on it, than you would be with a drone. So really, just trying to help.
So 20 seconds left. Best time to do it, though, before the FAA says, hey, no more flights.
Yeah, before
Right
the
after
storm,
disaster?
right after the storm, okay. And then before they put up the flight restriction, before they start bringing in the helos for rescue.
And what can and can't they fly in weather-wise? Can they fly over, you know, fires and whatnot, or is the smoke a problem?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they can fly 40 mile an hour winds is about the max. And some of them are now waterproof, so you can fly in the rain. Once it gets past that, we kind of stop, and then we come back after.
You got your bags packed, bro?
Yeah, got them packed. Let's go.
All right. Matt Sloane from Atlanta Drone Group. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, let's talk about what it looks like from the air in downtown Miami right now. This is our drone shot here. We're here with Atlanta Drones. Ben and Jake are doing yeoman's work here. Look at what we don't see, first of all, and that's down on the roads. I mean, I can't even count. There's just nobody here. There's nobody out roaming around. Think about it. We're toward the tail end of rush hour in downtown Miami. Are you kidding me?
Oh, there's the drone. Look at the drone above Jim Cantori's location there in Estero. But I was saying, Jim, that up on those high rises, you know, this was a big test of the Miami building code with these high rises, and we're going to be fascinated to see what you see in the drone there, and see how things
Come with me.
went.
Come with me. Hey, Brian, watch the cord. Watch the cord. Brian, come here. Shoot his monitor. Shoot his monitor. I want to show you what we're seeing on the drone, if that's possible. Wipe the lens off. Okay, this is
right,
maybe
Jim,
a quick
20
look
seconds here, but real quick.
at what's going on. Yeah, so here you go. Here's what we're looking at. I can't see much damage at all here in terms of any roof damage, which is great news. Looking at the parking lot, looking at the top of our hotel here. I think all in all, this looks pretty good, at least at first look, at first glance.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much all I have right now, and we'll have some time towards the end to have open up the floor for a Q&A session here. But without further ado, allow me to introduce the CEO of Atlanta Drone Group, Matt Sloane. We'll be telling you about disaster response for the oil and gas industry. Matt, take it away.
Walt. I am here to introduce the iPhone 9. I know, I feel like that's what I'm standing up here like I'm, you know, whatever. Anyway, that joke didn't work. You were right, it was bad. One of the things I want to say about hurricane coverage that I think is really important, that Walt mentioned as well, is using the drone in an appropriate way. Just using the drone to show aerial shots really doesn't do anything. But one of the things that we've had a lot of conversation with Cantori about is how to actually use the drone to tell the story. Walt alluded to this, but seeing things that you couldn't otherwise see. Jim and I were in Florida for Hurricane Matthew last summer, and we actually were able to see the flood gauge. And he said, you know, this is the thing that's going to tell us if this town is flooded and if people can come back in and how much water came in. It's out in the middle of the water, so there's no way we could have seen it otherwise, so we used the drone for that. Using the drone to show that everybody was gone from Miami, rather than just, hey, look at these pretty pictures. So that's one thing that I think Jim does particularly well. I have to say I'm a little exhausted just watching the clips over again, because he's such an intense guy, and everything that surrounds Jim is very intense. But that meal was fantastic, and half cooked in an Otis Spunkmeyer cookie oven. So props to our co-founder Ben for that. One of the things that we haven't talked yet about is oil and gas industry, engineering side of things. We did some emergency response in between Hurricane Harvey and Irma for a pipeline client of ours, and I can't really go into a whole lot of detail, but I'm going to tell you about sort of the broad strokes of what happened. We are using drones for inspecting refineries, inspecting petroleum pipelines, nuclear power plants. One of the conversations we're having now is about how to decon a drone that's been in a high nuclear area. I'll be talking to you after this, Dr. Dallas. But that's something that we really have to think about. It's not just a matter of putting them up and taking pretty pictures. Now we're actually gathering some strong data. Power grid inspections. We have worked a couple of railroad disasters. I talked earlier in my session on public safety use of drones about HAZMAT, hazardous materials operations. And if you think about the fact that every time a truck or a train overturns, some poor firefighter has to get into what they call a level A biohazard suit. And it could take them about 45 minutes to get into the suit. Then they have to actually physically walk to the site where it's leaking, figure out what's coming out of the truck or trailer, and then start to mitigate it. So now you've wasted 45 minutes. You've wasted $2,500 on a level A suit, and not to mention the most important part, you've put somebody's life in danger trying to go down there and deal with it. If you send a $500 DJI Spark or something that you don't care about losing, no offense if there's any DJI people in the room, if you send that downrange, not only have you done it in about 30 seconds, but you haven't put anybody's life in danger, you can now start to mitigate the disaster within a minute or two rather than 45 minutes. And you're saving the $2,500 that suit costs. So something very important that we like to emphasize. And of course, ports as well too, and other critical infrastructure. One of the pipeline client that we actually got to respond for actually shut the pipeline down proactively because they were afraid of what would happen if it shut down by itself. So we also, as I mentioned, they wanted us there quickly. And the quickest way to get there was on a citation. Quickest way to get there was on a citation. So not the way that I thought we'd be chartering our first private jet as a company, but at least somebody else was paying the tab, so that worked out nicely. The point that I'm making here with this airplane is that these are a lot easier to deploy than a helicopter or an air asset of any kind. If you look at what's going on now at the Santa Rosa fires up in Northern California, they're using 747s. Obviously, those you can fly in, but things like helicopters don't travel very far before having to refuel. So you can get drone assets in the air and on location much more quickly. One of the things that you do have to worry about with helicopters also is the prop wash, particularly in an oil and gas scenario. If you're trying to take accurate readings of how much oil and gas is flying out, the last thing you want to do is bring a giant fan in and blow it all away. That does happen to some degree with a drone as well, but certainly not the effect that you would have with a helicopter. Inspection is another really important part here. You can fly closer. You can fly sensors closer and slower, particularly on UAVs with obstacle avoidance. If you take a look at this tower right up here, right there, we could get either right up to that tower within 5 feet of it and look at something very small, or we could use a zoom lens and be 25, 50, 100 feet and still zoom in and get that same image. Something interesting about that tower, the client who owns it was telling us that it would cost $250,000, so $250,000 to put scaffolding up to inspect that tower. $250,000, or whatever a drone company charges to get in there and do it in 0.1% of the time. So that you start to see the value proposition for drones there. We'll talk about LiDAR here in a minute. That's another big one. The other thing, aside from the financial cost, is that an inspection company, who I won't mention the name of the company, but that does a lot of inspection, has one fatality every other week in this country. So one person is dying every other week doing inspections on towers like these. If we can save even one of those people by using a drone, I think the value proposition is clear. This is just to give you an idea of the cost differential between a helicopter and a UAV. This is based on a Bell 407. The product cost is $2.4 million versus $30,000 for a fully kitted out drone with some good sensors on it. Of course, they can go up from there. Fuel burn, 49 gallons per hour on the 407, and about a half a gallon an hour to charge batteries if you're running a generator on the UAV. Total operating cost of a helicopter per hour, and this is on the cheap side, is $608, or about $25 with a helicopter. So again, just making the case for that value proposition. Some of the objectives when we go out on one of these inspections or emergency response, assessing the damage to assets, and that's primarily why we were brought in between the hurricanes to assess any damage that they would have had to the pipeline, because the goal was to turn it back on at some point, and they wanted to make sure that something wasn't broken. Anybody notice that gas prices went up about 50 cents in between those hurricanes? That was the pipeline. And it was off for 5 days. I think it cost them something like $6 million or something in lost revenue by not moving gas through that pipe. They had some of the pipe going, but it's 5,000 miles that runs across the East Coast. But this was very close to the origin point, so the rest of the line wasn't getting anything. We can actually secure pipelines and right-of-ways. We can inspect for fluid or gas leaks. There are various types of sensors that we'll get into here, but we have gas detectors we can put on drones that will detect up to 35 different kinds of gases. That's invaluable and information that you need to know if you're about to turn back on a pipeline and you think that it might be leaking gas. What you're looking at here, this is actually a spill containment model. What they basically do is when you have a big tank of something, they actually plan for the spill. And the pool that the tank sits in has to be able to contain the entire contents of the tank. So we actually were able to use drones in this case to do a volumetric calculation on that hole and make sure that it could contain everything that was going into the tank. So let's talk about the different payloads. You guys are familiar with a lot of these. We've talked about them all day today and yesterday. They're pretty much the same payloads that we use with a few exceptions in the commercial side or the consumer side of things. The XT, DJI XT camera, that's a thermal imaging camera that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We've got the X4 and X5S series. The Z30 camera is if anybody's not used this camera, it's unbelievable. It's a 30x optical and 6x digital zoom camera. We actually took it from my house in Decatur. I was able to zoom into the Westin downtown Atlanta and see the spire on top close enough so that if a person were on it, I would be able to see them. That's 7 miles from Decatur. So having the ability to zoom, while scary a little bit, on the privacy side of things is actually incredibly useful on the industrial side. Now dual sensor ability. We have this on our Matrice 210 aircraft, so that's the zoom camera and the thermal camera, both on the same aircraft at the same time. And then a top-mounted camera. So if we are doing inspection and we need to get up underneath something, we can do that as well. This is a thermal image of Plant Bowen up in Cartersville that we shot from a public safety agency's headquarters. But it's very clear what you're looking at there. The red stuff is hot and the green stuff is cold. Not a particularly diagnostic image, but just to kind of give you an idea of how thermal imaging can help. This is the Centroid system that we can put on our M600 aircraft. Basically, that's basically a rebreather bag underneath that can take a sample of the air and analyze it for those 35 different gases that we talked about. One of the cool things, well, let me back up. This is a double-edged sword because with an aircraft like a drone, a quadrotor, when you're bringing it in, it's going to disturb that air sample. So that's a big concern for detecting this kind of stuff. And one of the ways around that is to actually use a gas camera. So not only can you sample the air for the gas, but you can actually use a camera to look at the gas. So this is the FLIR VOC camera. It's about a $50,000 payload, but you can actually see 4 different gases, the 4 most common gases in the air. One of the things we haven't talked a lot about is asset tracking with drones. Obviously, you're familiar with this guy, the Inspire 1. But you see this big square underneath here is actually an RFID antenna. When we first started delving into asset tracking with drones, we saw that the use case was huge, and we couldn't really figure out quite how to do it correctly. It's now been about 2 years, and we're still working it out, but we've gotten a lot closer to it. When you start to think about what an RFID sensor can do for you, a sensor that costs 2 cents, and sometimes a lot less than that. You think about an auto yard. You guys have seen some of these huge parking lots outside of some of the auto plants, or even just at a car dealership. You can put a 2-cent sensor in each one of those cars and know exactly where it is at all times. You can have a fixed head reader that tells you when it leaves the lot. You can have a fixed head reader that tells you when it's in the shop and when it leaves the shop and how long it stayed in the shop. You can actually, I don't think we have the warehouse video in here. You can actually fly that drone through a warehouse and detect the sensor on every single item inside every single box on every single shelf. So if any of you have ever done retail stocking, this would make your lives a lot easier. You think about expanding that to the likes of Walmart or Target or any of these big box retailers, and the amount of stuff that they have in warehouses, and that you start to see the value proposition there as well. Some other cool stuff that we're working on. This is a magnetometry image, so we can put magnetometers on drones and fly them over to find different metallic sources underground. I can't talk too much about a project that we're working on there, but just know that it's really cool and you'll hear about it soon. We also have the ability now to put ground-penetrating radar on drones. You can do what you do with Pix4D above ground now underground, and map sources underground. So what does that mean? Well, that means we can find pipes, we can find other stuff that's buried, like landmines, and now take the duty of mitigating landmines away from small children in third world countries and put it on aircraft. That's something near and dear to my heart as being able to do good with drones. The data is what we get from the sensors, of course, and this is all stuff that we've worked on. This is down at the, I'll never get this acronym right, the Security and Emergency Response Training Center? CERTSI? Yeah, okay. This is down at CERTSI, which is owned by the 8 major railroad companies, and they run trains into each other at high speed and blow them up for training stuff, which sounds like a lot of fun. I really want to go try that. But we had aircraft down there doing thermal imaging, mapping, and electro-optical reading. And we were able to find the simulated victims of this train derailment. This is the Z30 zoom camera. So this is the unzoomed image, and that's the zoomed in image. So you can see how far up we were there, probably about 400, right around 400 feet, and zoom in and you can see a bolt on the side of that ferry. You see the cage that's around this one. Is anybody familiar with the Flyability Helios? Now, this is a really exciting aircraft that actually has a carbon fiber cage around the entire aircraft. So you can bump it into walls and it'll actually roll along the wall. So we're not talking about obstacle avoidance, but using the obstacles to help it get to a location. It has daylight, it has thermal, has bright lights on it as well too. Our law enforcement guys are really excited about this as a possible active shooter drone as well too. Then of course we've got the thermal imaging camera. On the radiometric cameras, you can actually take accurate temperature readings. And then here we've got some volumetric calculations as well. So, anybody here familiar with LiDAR? Light distancing and ranging. It's a very exciting technology that is now small enough that we can put on a drone. LiDAR sends out about 700,000 pulses of light per second. And for every pulse of light that goes out, it finds a point and reports back. So now you have that point in space. And you create what's called a point cloud. This is what a point cloud looks like. And you can actually put a LiDAR scanner on a manned aircraft at about 100 miles an hour, and you will not be able to outrun the scanner. So it's categorizing everything that it sees around you in the built environment real time. To give you an example of how cool this technology is, if you send a survey team out to capture data and capture 1 million survey data points, it would take them 16.5 years. If you did it with an optical camera using photogrammetry, it would take 1.5 years. If you did it with LiDAR, 6 seconds. So now, again, back to that value proposition. That scanner, well, not that one, but some of the survey grade ones are $150,000 scanners. But if you can do what would have taken 16 and a half years in 6 seconds, then it starts to make sense. So we've designed all these sensors, well, not we. The industry has designed all these sensors for specific use cases, but there's a lot of spin-off use here. Things that we never thought would be possible, now we can use existing sensors for. This is a shot of cows in a search and rescue that we were honored to be a part of up in North Georgia. This is broad daylight, and so we were able to not only, we were looking for the person, not the cows, but we happened to see them. But this technology could then be expanded to look at the health of cows. Is one cow hotter than another cow? How many cows are there? Actually counting things in an image. We have seen applications for drones where you could fly a drone through, what was an orange grove, right? An orange grove, and actually count the number of oranges on the trees. That's important data if you're the farmer and you want to know how many oranges you have left. We're also integrating things like payload delivery. Here we have an Inspire 1 flying a life jacket on a beach in about 15-mile-an-hour winds. I was able to deliver it right to the fire chief's hands, about 500 feet downrange. Here, actually, this is the video I was talking about, but it's a still image of the drone flying through the warehouse using SLAM technology. So it's simultaneous localization and mapping. Can actually map out the built environment similar to LiDAR and geolocate all of these RFID tags that we have built on stuff. And then, of course, tethering drones and being able to actually drive up to a scene and launch a drone without having to take it out of the box. Some of the stuff that's coming in the future that I'm super excited about, AR and VR. So, you know, I spent many years at CNN. My friends at CNN, VR are the second most popular site for VR content behind YouTube. And how do we incorporate drones into that type of technology? Our buddy Dusty here, who's down at CERTSI, has some AR goggles on, and he's actually able to see the flight path of his drone as he's flying it. So not only he can see through it, he can see the drone, but he can also see where it's going to fly, what kind of data it's getting, all without taking his eyes off the bird. Beyond visual line of sight, I think, is happening. It's critical, and it will happen in a much bigger way. But I think that's going to be the next iteration of the drone industry. AI and machine learning is really fascinating to me. This is more Walt's area of expertise than mine, but taking the 3 widgets here, this one was designed by a human. This was the optimized design by a human, and then this one was designed by a machine. The one on the right was done in a couple of hours and is every bit as strong as the one on the left, but it eliminated all the waste. And that's using machine learning, so using a computer to optimize design and technology, weight and payloads and balance and things like that. I'm not going to say any more about that because I'll be making it up if I keep going on that. So, the ultimate goal here, and I don't mean to depress anybody who's a student here, but the ultimate goal here is to get rid of the pilot. And it's not good for me either. So, but using machine learning, using obstacle avoidance sensors, using SLAM technology, the idea is that we can make the machines do it without putting any of us in danger and without, frankly, factoring in the human error that comes along with all of it. One of the things that I talked about today in my public safety talk is the idea that you can put a thermal camera on a drone and you can go out and look at cows when you're doing a search and rescue, but I have no idea what I'm looking at. And I waste a lot of time. I'm sure there's people in here who are better at it than I am, but I waste a lot of time when I'm assisting on a search and rescue going and looking at stuff that ends up being a log or a rabbit. So I think that where machine learning can really come in handy in this arena is to actually help process that data real time and find out, you know, is that a log, is that a person, or what's the probability that it's a person, so I can actually devote resources to going over there and checking it out. And that's where this industry is heading, which is super exciting to me. So that's it. That's all I got. And I'll give it back to you, Walt, and we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, actually, you want to go ahead and open it up for questions?
Yeah.
Kind of running short on time here.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anybody that has any questions? And thank you for having us, by the way.
Appreciate it.
So it depends on the case. A lot of times nobody's funding us, and these are either clients that we've worked with in the past or people who just say, hey, we need your help. One of the things that I was very clear about from the beginning when we started our company was we are not in this to make money. I do this because I love it, and sure, we have to keep the lights on, but that's not our primary mission. So we've gone out and done a lot of this stuff gratis. Obviously, the stuff that we do for TV, you know, they pay us. But that's our primary mission. That said, and without getting on too much of a soapbox here, there is FEMA has been very far behind the curve with UAVs, and it's something that I am really upset about. Because I think that it's almost negligent at this point to not use UAVs for search and rescue capability. I have finally started to get some traction and some people who will take my phone calls. But there will be a framework in the future, I believe, at some point where just like they'll call firefighters from around the country to go fight a fire, they will call drone teams from around the country to go out and do this stuff. There has to be. And frankly, we have 60 or 70 clients around the country who have amazing drone programs, would be happy to go out and do that stuff, but they're being asked to leave all their equipment at home. So I think I'll leave it at that, but you see where I'm heading with that. Yeah. Yeah. You want to talk about that?
I'm sorry.
The question was, are they used in thermal sensors used in earthquakes to help do urban search and rescue?
Oh, absolutely. The beauty about thermal is you can actually see through a lot of obstructions that you think you couldn't see through. You know, like, for example, like vegetation or even some debris you can see through. It's obviously limited if there's a lot of rubble. You can't see through rubble, but we're actually working with a few agencies to kind of develop some technology that can. But I'll have to leave it at that for now.
And smoke too, I think, is another big
smoke
one
is
too.
a big
So when
one.
you know when
Smoke,
you're in a
rain.
smoky area, you know the thermal image is actually able to eliminate that. So yeah, they are definitely being used. I'm obviously referencing my earlier comments. Would like to see it being used more. Who else? Great. Thank you again for
I want to
having me.
thank Walt and Matt for coming out and joining us today. Gentlemen, thank you. Great way to end the day. Thank you very much. Just a couple of closing notes. I want to thank again all of the sponsors who helped make this possible. This was a truly cross-campus effort. We had members of our organizing committee that came from multiple different colleges and units on campus, and I want to thank every single one of them for their participation in this. And for those of you who aren't associated with the University of Georgia, you may not know this, but our motto is to teach, to serve, and to inquire into the nature of things. Those are the three charges that everybody who works at the university have. So I want to sort of break that down. Over the last 2 days, you've seen more than 40 people helping to teach you. We've had this wonderful committee both within the college and across campus, into Georgia with the Georgia Economic Development Council and a bunch of other, I'm not even going to try and name everybody because I know I'm going to forget, but they were serving to help put this together. And then the last part is for those of you who are here, to inquire into the nature of things. I think that's most definitely what we are doing with this technology as we are putting it up in the air to help tell stories, to help understand our communities, to understand all of the issues that we are facing, whether it is environmental concerns, industrial concerns, journalistic concerns. Once again, I want to thank you on behalf of the Grady College and Dean Charles Davis. Everybody go have a wonderful evening here in Athens, and we hope to see you up in the air soon. Thanks.